All right, welcome back. Part two of this Retro Rebel December special. This time, what I'd like to do, shine a light on some of the personalities, some of the internet, the influencers, the streamers, people that we watch that a lot of times sort of maybe even enlighten us to games that we hadn't heard of before. Some of which give us background information, share some of our thoughts on some of these games. These are other individuals in the internet, into the ether that we support, we watch, and we think you should too if these things seem to spark an interest with you. So they run the gamut. I think I've got some that are tabletop gaming, retro gaming, and then some of them are much more specific. So, yeah, but absolutely. So, I guess without further ado, we could jump right into it. Do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
You go first. Let's
Yeah,
dive.
I'll go first this time. So the ones I've got listed, the whole idea for this really it sort of hit me because I was watching a video by this first individual I want to talk to, and they did this exact same thing. They actually were shouting out all these other YouTubers that had a presence, but not really a big footprint, where there weren't a lot of people that were following them, but maybe they should. They've got a lot of good things to say. They put out really high quality content. And so the first one I want to mention is a channel called Rasputin. I don't know if you're familiar with it. Rasputin, his icon that you can click on, it's Razbuten. It's a paper bag over his head. So
Yeah, I
you
see
can't
it.
see him. And I don't know that you ever see his face. But he's very articulate. He's very thoughtful. His videos are in the kind of the golden area of 20 to 40 minutes at most. But he goes into deep, I think, evergreen topics where no matter when you listen to him, it's not necessarily it's not the game that he's talking about. It's on a deeper level. And I think that there's just, he talks a little bit about non gamers gaming. So if you're someone who's not necessarily a gamer, but you have these particular interests, he may point you towards some games that you might find interesting. So if you're trying to break into gaming, or I know he does a few things akin to girlfriend reviews, if you've ever watched them. I love that channel. It's some of the best 9 minutes of entertainment that I think you can get. Well put together, very funny. But her perspective is what it's like to watch someone else play games if you're the significant other. And he sort of does the same thing. If you've got a significant other that you're trying to introduce to gaming, he gives you some sort of tactics to get them involved. Maybe some games to start them off on so that they're not overwhelmed with how complicated gaming can be. But Rasputin definitely, and he's got a couple episodes that also shed light on some of the other up and coming YouTubers. So if you find those episodes, they're definitely worth checking out.
Excellent. My first one is a creator that we both consume and have talked about a million times on this channel, so I won't go into detail. But James Stephanie Sterling has incredible articulate insights and game reviews, talks about some of the problems that we like to highlight. And I don't know if we're influenced by them or, or vice versa, but always really poignant, topical, newsworthy content. And they have their own website where they still post game reviews and stuff, which I've linked to in the comments.
Yes, I'm a fan. Very rarely disagree, and generally, if I disagree with them, it's more of a quibble on a specific, not on the general premise. So yeah, I highly recommend as well. My next one is a really interesting video essayist, and his name is Jacob Geller. Jacob Geller. He's got video essays on a lot of things. He's got a podcast on gaming now, and he does a lot of horror games, which I prefer to watch and not play. But he does a lot of that. But he is very thoughtful. I believe he must have been a journalism major or a writing major of some sort, because his essays are, he's incredibly articulate, very well thought out topics. And I believe I have learned something every time I've watched one of his videos. So they're heavily researched, well researched videos, everything from gaming and like the psychology of gaming, like why we can't throw anything away and why we collect everything in games sometimes. So that there's a psychological component to it.
That's a royal we there. I'd be
It's
dropping lots of stuff.
you mean I do, because as we know, it's like if you tell me this is going to be a scarce resource, then that we should hold on to, then it means I'm never going to use it.
You're never
Like
going to survive in Starfield. Like
I,
everything says that it's rare.
well, and exactly right. And so I'll have all these things. I did it in Baldur's Gate 3 where they give you there's a beholder that you have in a bottle. And
Hmm.
I kept that beholder because you're supposed to be able to use it against other. I mean, you could just throw it out in a boss fight and then it just runs wild. You can also call, if you get the horn, you can call these ogres in.
I never use
And
the horn, but I use the bottle.
I used the bottle and I tried to use the horn, but once you leave a particular zone, it says the ogres can't hear it anymore. And
Uh,
so you can't actually use it. And I was like, dang it. So I held on to it until way too late and then I could never use it. So,
that's funny.
but yeah. So Jacob Geller, very well thought out, very well done. And topics range from real world topics to a lot of gaming topics. So
Awesome. My next one is another one, unfortunately, that I think we both consume, and that is Yahtzee over at Zero Punctuation Game Reviews. Now, he's now left The Escapist and he is doing his own thing, which is great, super support him. However, it does mean that The Escapist and Zero Punctuation has put up a master list of everything that he's ever reviewed on Zero Punctuation. So I have linked to that. It's a huge playlist. If you just want to enjoy fast, snippety reviews of video games and like sort of waltz through video game memory lane, it is quite a watch.
I want to say he's been doing it for about 15 years at
Yeah, a long
least.
time.
I remember when he first started, and it had only been about a year, and I've been watching him since then. And those little 8, 9 minute videos, or 5 or 6 minute videos, and he's talking as fast as he can with zero punctuation. Very funny. Yeah, Yahtzee's a good one, and he's been doing this for a long time. And he and Stephanie Sterling have done some collaborations in the past when they were both a part of the Escapists. So yeah, that's a good one. Yahtzee is definitely a good one. And I own both of his, well, at least two of his books. I don't know if he's written another one, but he's also written two books, Mog World, and I think he wrote maybe a sequel to it, which is it's a good book. Basically, it's mashing up Final Fantasy and World of Warcraft themes in a comedy book with an undead main character. It's actually pretty interesting. My next one is another video essayist that I think deserves a whole lot more notoriety than he gets at this time, and his channel is called Daryl Talks Games. Daryl Talks Games. Daryl is a psychology major or a psychology. I mean, he's got a degree in psychology, and so a lot of what he does is talk about the psychology of games. So he talk about the psychology of Dark Souls. He talks about he has a video on the elevators in games, just on the elevators. And if you watch it, you would think you couldn't make a 25-minute video or a 30-minute video on just the elevators. But the way he takes that topic and ties it to psychological principles in gaming and why we do a lot of what we do, he bases it on the literature. So he's
What is
actually
it called again? Sorry.
Daryl Talks Games. It's
Sweet.
actually it's a very like if you're looking to watch something and you want to learn something about it, but you also are talking about video games. Every single one of his he even talks about the backlog, the psychology of the backlog. So all of us have this anxiety of all these games that we haven't played. Well, many of us do have this anxiety. I haven't reached these games. I've got this whole backlog. I'll never get to it. And then sometimes it paralyzes you from advancing or doing anything else. And it's a metaphor for other things that are in our life as well. And he kind of approaches it from that perspective, that when you've got all these things that are overwhelming you and how it prevents you from maybe proceeding, there's a tie there, and he kind of connects it to video games as well. So Daryl Talks Games, very informational, a great channel to if you haven't discovered it yet. I think that there's a lot to be gained. So
Okay, love that. I'm also making sure the official Temple of Geek YouTube channel does follow all of these content creators. So if you want to look and see who we're following, you'll be able to find all of these if you
very
can type as
nice.
fast as I can.
Yeah.
Okay, so my next one is a bit off the beaten path. So this is an English creator called Ashens, and primarily Ashens does like unboxing of usually really crappy or vintage toys, but sometimes that also includes like knockoff video game handheld consoles and that sort of stuff. And he also made a video that premiered, I think, on YouTube, and it's called Ashens and the Quest for the Game Child or something. It's like a full length feature film about this really crappy knockoff Game Boy called The Game Child. I don't know what it is about his channel that I find so funny, but if you like sort of unusual unboxing with a bit of improv comedy mixed in, there is video game stuff, but there's also toys and all sorts sort of mixed in. So it's an interesting channel to follow, and I recommend it.
Oh, very nice, very nice. My next one is also it's a European channel, obviously not exclusive to Europe in that I can see it as well in the States, but it's Eurothug 4000. Eurothug
Euro
4000.
Thug 4000, what a name.
Yeah, well, yeah, and so if you go just from that perspective, you know, what are you expecting? What are you expecting from Eurothug? Well, would you expect it to be a 20 something relatively meek sounding female as the lead? Well, then that's probably not necessarily what you would think. But that's exactly who it is. It's a sort of a quiet, I'm trying to think of, I mean, because everything I want to say is positive and supposed to be a compliment, but she has very low energy in terms of like she's not yelling at you, not
That's good.
speaking
It's
really quickly.
aesthetic. It's chill.
It's chill. It's a very chill, but and it's very much from her perspective. But she will talk about games and sort of her experience and how it makes her feel, and sort of taking that game and themes from that game and sort of extrapolating that to a much bigger target. Maybe just generally speaking, how this sort of affects or is a part of reflected in society, or in other things like that. So again, it's another video essayist who is looking at common themes in video games and sort of applying them on a much more mainstream, much more you know yeah, much more mainstream application. So across society, everything I've seen of hers is also very well done. Not a heavily followed channel yet, but I know there's a lot of individuals that I follow that respect her and have been bringing her on to their shows because she just does really high quality work. So
I love it.
yeah.
Okay, well, the next one on my list is sort of a 2000s, maybe 20, like max 2010 channel for gaming comedy, and that's Dorkly. Sometimes their skits just crease me, right? Now, it is sort of like a college humor smosh level sort of vibe, but if you like that, then they're, hugely popular and successful. You're bound to find a video that interests you. They've got all sorts of things going on over on their channel. They have millions and millions of subscribers, so they're, Dorkly is kind of a big deal. But
Yeah.
I always stumble across something that amuses me with them, so I thought I'd put it on the list.
Yeah. Well, I know I've seen some of their stuff and I think I may have followed them at some point, but I need to check them out again. Um, my next one is sort of a niche channel in that uh, he deals almost exclusively with, well, he does with the past, and that is the gaming historian. The gaming historian does, man, he does really well researched video essays on the history of video games, and so everything from the origin of Tetris, which is basically a documentary. It's about an hour long, but it is very well done, and it talks about like all of the difficulties that the creator of Tetris went through to get that game even made, and how he lost the rights to it, and so on and so forth, and how it's kind of ubiquitous in gaming now. It's like it's everywhere, and who owns what at this point. So um, but he'll go into the history of all consoles, peripherals, different controllers, many things that you may have never even heard of, didn't even know existed. He doesn't put out a whole lot of content in terms of like frequency, but again, everything he puts out is
It's
high
high
quality.
quality.
So yeah, if you want to kind of dive into the history of gaming, he is, as far as I know, the authority on gaming history. So and he attends a lot of the conventions as well. So the gaming historian is someone that you could actually run into if you go to these conventions.
Right.
Um,
Okay.
so
All right.
another good channel.
I'm with you. I'm also throwing out a bit of a niche one. So this is a channel. Well, not a channel per se, at least why I follow it, and that's the DM Lair. So they do like GM advice, like videos, live streams, that sort of stuff. They talk about like the different types of bad dungeon masters and like gear that every dungeon master should have, and like how to check if you're doing things right or wrong. But I follow their YouTube channel, but I more so spend time on their website, which has like free resources for dungeon masters, like traps and monsters and maps and all that sort of stuff. And they are really frequent at publishing this sort of stuff. So I do use it. I have run many a module off of their website, and so it seems only fair that I promote it on my meager platform.
No, that's fair, and I think I'll sort of segue to a similar channel as well. That I'm not as avid of a Dungeons and Dragons and player as you are. I'm a big fan, huge fan. Watch Critical Role since the beginning, and but just don't I don't really play myself. But the Dungeon Dad is really just his channel name. He is a Canadian that does conversions of obscure monsters into fifth edition,
Nice.
and so he'll take he's got a whole series on chromatic dragons, uh, metallic dragons, and those are some. That's I think where the origin of it was, and like there's just some monsters that you would have never thought I never knew existed. He does the lore of the monster. He even does, and if you pay on his Patreon, you'll get an actual game card like it's coming out of the bestiary, like it's right from a dungeon master book,
Sweet.
and it's got everything including his character stats, and like his powers and everything as it's transferred to the rules in 5e. So um, I every week comes out with a new monster. It's so there's something to check out, but that's effectively the what the whole channel is. So you don't watch people play per se. You're just learning about monsters that have been converted to 5e, and so very useful for somebody who wants to put together a campaign using obscure monsters that are in the game or have been converted to work in the game. And
Love it.
so he even creates hooks that he gives to you at the end to say, okay, here's a way you could incorporate this monster into your campaign. Here are some ideas that would work. And so he kind of paints the picture for you as how you could incorporate them. He does it all for you. All you got to do is plug it in. So another really interesting, especially if you're a Dungeons and Dragons fan, a good watch.
I love it. That
Yeah.
was all the creators that I wanted to shout out. Did you have any others?
I have one more, and this is the last one that I had, and he's sort of a niche one in that he does mostly horror games. So there's a theme there as well. But he's an Australian, I believe. Is he goes by the name Indie Mouse, but it's spelled differently. It's INDEIMAUS.
Interesting.
Indie Mouse, and
Hate it? No.
he's very. What's that?
I said I hate it.
Well, he's very funny. He's got a very dry sense of humor, and so basically, what he'll do is he will play the game, and he'll sort of edit the video so for entertainment purposes. It's not just a
Love it.
playthrough, but he'll voice over it. So
Well, let's
some
not
of
judge
it
people who just record playthroughs. Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with that. Hey, who has the time? So but that's his shtick though, is he'll voice over, or some of it he will actually be recording while he's playing it. So you'll hear him sort of go through the process, the mental process, the inner monologue that some of us have. His just happens to be pretty funny. And so what he's saying is happening, or what should happen, or he's got some pretty good one liners, some quips. And so it's entertaining from a humor standpoint, but also he gives a I would say very fair review of some of these horror games as to good, bad, and otherwise. Is it worth your time? Is it? He doesn't just play games because he's a masochist and he's trying to put himself through the worst possible experience. People will suggest games, he'll play them, and he'll tell you if it's good or not. So you do get a little bit of information as well, besides just entertainment and a little bit of humor. So Indie Mouse, another good one to check out. So those are the channels that we think you might enjoy, especially based on your relative interests. Um,
There you go.
yeah, definitely think you should check those out. And well, let's wrap up this episode with looking forward to 2024. We had a sort of like you said in the previous episode, a it was slim pickings in terms of the gaming, and a lot of that is reflective or a reflection of the COVID period and the slow period in design, and I think that's absolutely true. But 2024 doesn't necessarily seem to be that much different. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I mean, even the banner titles of 2023, there were some that were a bit hit or miss. I mean, you and I both played Diablo 4, and depending on the type of character they created, had completely different experiences with the game. I loved the campaign, hated the end game. You could barely get started and didn't really enjoy much of anything. And I think huge titles like Starfield were a bit of a failure to launch. People realized they were these big, huge, vapid environments that actually weren't that fun to explore. And most people quickly abandoned them, aside from my initial playthrough, where I admit I was excited to see what was going on, but I did feel that it seemed to be a little bit on rails. I didn't know where the exploration part was going to come in and stuff. I never picked it up after that. So for 2024, I am focusing on games that I'm pretty confident that I'm going to like, just full stop. Like, I don't think that they can get it wrong. I'm not taking any gambles this year. I only have two titles, so I'll just rattle them off. I won't make anybody feel any sense of suspense. Um, so for me, the two games that I'm excited for in 2024 are Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 and Wolf Among Us 2. And so The Wolf Among Us, obviously, that was a really great game from Telltale, like back in the day. Like, it's a really interesting story. I enjoyed it. I would play more of it. So the fact that there's a second part is pretty exciting to me. I don't want to say I don't know how they could possibly screw it up, because I can think of some ways, but I think it's a safe bet. And then Vampire the Masquerade, I played that as LARP back in college in 2005. Um, and it was a great experience. I've never been able to play any of the previous games because I either have had other things going on or they're not on Game Pass or whatever. As I understand, people say they really refined this sort of game that this game format. And so I'm looking forward to Bloodlines 2. I'm hoping that that'll be the first one that I actually pick up in the franchise, and that it will be even better than the original, the first game that came out. So those
Is
are the two that I'm excited for. Everything else that I would have been excited for has been pushed back. So I'm just not even going to mention it because I don't
No,
believe
that's
that
fair.
it'll actually come out. So
Did for Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2, it's a mouthful.
mm,
Is it the same sort of game where you get to pick the type of vampire you want to be and so on? Or is it what that game was? That didn't they release a game that was more like episodic and sort of a first person view that was more on rails than the other, which was sort of an open world?
as I understand, this is more of like you pick a clan, you make your character. It's like sort of more
Sort of just like the
RPG.
first one then.
Yeah, it's an action RPG, but it's more of an RPG as I understand.
Well, that would be something I would be interested in as well. Okay, cool. Uh, well, there I have three, and so I'll just list them
Oh,
out
good.
to.
We're both brevity is the soul of wit.
That's right. There we go. Um, the two that are coming out earlier in the year actually have release dates as far as I could tell. Um, Star Wars Outlaws. is supposed to be sort of an action RPG as well. I think they're mashing together a few games that were canceled at one point, including I think it's 1313, which was supposed to be the backstory of Boba Fett. This was a few years ago before they came out with Jedi Survivor or Jedi Outcast. But you sort of play as an outlaw slash not really a bounty hunter, but I think that's you're sort of an outlaw more than anything else. Um, it looks great in terms of like the graphics and the gameplay. I think it's taking some pages from um, Jedi Survivor and that particular game series in terms of the art style. But I'm very anxious to kind of see what they do with this. I'm hopeful because uh, the last two games that are associated with the Star Wars platform have been really good. At least the console versions, and I'm hopeful that this is going to be good. It's something I'm looking forward to anyway. And then the next one is Black Myth Wukong, which is a game that I've been tracking since last year. I think I mentioned it in January of last year.
I think
We were
so.
talking about
It's not
games
the first
to
time I've heard of this, I swear.
yeah. Well, it's basically you're playing as this. It's sort of a I want to be sensitive to what I'm talking about. Effectively, it's you're a sort of a so in Japan, they're called yokai. Like a yokai is a spirit, a demon spirit, effectively. This isn't a yokai in Chinese culture, but it is a mythological character. It's a Chinese. Uh, it's a monkey, like a monkey monk, a warrior.
Yeah.
But in mythology, there is a
It's a
name for
real
that.
thing. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, a real thing. So there's a precedent for it in Chinese mythology, and so you're playing as that mythological god. And it's an action game. I don't know what kind of RPG elements it has in it, but it's definitely sort of a third person action game that looks a little bit like in terms of the gameplay as Jedi Outcast, Dark Souls, any of those where it's kind of over the shoulder third person action. So there's nothing necessarily new with that. There is something new. Oh, a game that it actually looks a lot more like is Sekiro. So it's a lot more like Sekiro, and that's a game I've wanted to kind of get my hands on and play a little bit as well. It's the whole Dark Souls thing that always pushes me away. It's like I don't want to be frustrated in my gameplay the whole time. I kind of like to be able to advance the story. So, but it is a game that I've been tracking for a while, and a game that I'm looking forward to next year. And then the last one really is as you said, it's probably not unexpected, and that's the World of Warcraft expansion. Um,
Surprise, surprise.
yeah. So at BlizzCon this year, they announced a different format for releasing their expansions. They announced three in a row, so the next
Oh,
three. So they're going to do this overarching story, and I think it's the War Within is what it's called, the first one, and they released the cinematic. We talked about it in last month's episode, and I'm looking forward to it for a number of reasons. I've played World of Warcraft since the inception, the very first month, November of 2004, when it was released. I bought it, and I've played it pretty consistently up till a couple years ago. I played it just about every year. I did play it every year.
mm,
But there have been a few expansions that I played and then sort of canceled my subscription to wait for the next and just see what's next because it didn't really hook me. This was a great expansion, but I think my heart wasn't in it. I think it was too much at this point to because there's a lot of maintenance daily check-ins, and
yeah,
I'm quite sure that this next is not going to be any different. There's still going to be the check-ins, the grind, all that stuff. I enjoy the story. I think for nostalgia's sake is probably why I'm hanging on, and the fact that I've played for 20 years, and
yeah.
that's almost blah to
But
even
I
say.
think you're I mean, 20 years, yeah, exactly. But
Right.
I think you're being rewarded with it. Like this expansion looks amazing. like all of my old guild members, anybody like on the periphery of my life that I used to play games with, they're all talking about, are we going to re-up our accounts? Are we getting the guild back together? You know, there's something about this expansion that has really got people excited. And maybe it's just the trajectory. Like there isn't an axe hanging over the neck of WoW players that they could just cut the live service at any time. The numbers have been falling, right? So,
Right.
you know, there's got to be a question of whether or not they're going to carry on. However, if what you said in the last part about GTA and paying for hours played and stuff, it's quite likely that the WoW sort of MMO model is the future of gaming, where you will pay a subscription to your games to access them for those hours of gameplay, and then you'll cancel them and switch them over. I mean, this is what I do with my Netflix, Disney Plus, like Paramount Plus,
Yep.
whatever. I just, when the show that I don't want to see isn't in syndication, I boot that to the curb and and put on Netflix, which usually pretty much year round has something I want. I just up and turn down my membership levels. So it's funny because I would have put WoW on my list of games I'm looking forward to. However, I have no stop. And I know that if I re upped my WoW subscription, I would just be sucking at least 3 months out of my life because I wouldn't be able to put it down. I loved WoW when I played it. I think I started playing it in like 2010, 2011. I played it for like 2 years really heavily. I'm talking like, you know, 2, 3 hours every night for
Yeah.
years, raiding and all that sort of stuff. I've had to put that down, but it does look good. And people in the gaming community, especially us elder millennials and younger Gen X's, are super excited about it.
It's and I think rightfully so. And one thing that Blizzard has done well, at least with World of Warcraft, is when they err on the side of doing something that seems greedy, just like objectively greedy with no upside to the consumer. The WoW community is very vocal about it. And so they definitely give them an earful. I think that has changed a lot of their behavior in terms of it curbs some of those decisions from being made. And I think it's given at least the illusion of some power back to the fans that they can help influence their game, something that they love and that they pay good money for every single month. And bringing Chris Metzen back, I think, was a huge step in the right direction. Somebody who loves the game, who has a vested interest in the characters, that wants to do what he wants to do right by the fans and what's in the best interest of the fan base. And I think that bringing someone like that to direct this ship in terms of story is only a good thing. I think he's got some really good ideas. He's sort of, for lack of a better way of explaining it, the father of much of the lore in Warcraft, all the way back to Warcraft 3, and so he's the voice of Thrall. I mean, it's there's a lot of he's got a lot of sort of fingers in the pie of World of Warcraft, and I think that this is a a I dare say it's a they're taking care of the fans by some of the decisions that they're making, bringing in management, some of the quality of life changes that they're making to the game, trying to keep a steady schedule of content, which is, I think, in good faith for the fans. And because in the end, that's where some of these other companies are going wrong, is they think you can just make decisions that have to do exclusively with making money for them, and we're still going to be there. Like 12 live service games they don't even have names for, but they've got 12 live service games, but then they're like, oh, we're sorry, we're just going to cut that in half because of y'all. No, they're not. They're doing it because it blew up in their face.
Yeah.
Whereas this seems to be an act in good faith for the fans that, look, there's a give and take. It's $14 a month, $15 a month. Okay. What am I getting out of it?
Yeah.
And every month they seem to put out content, every expansion. It looks like they're doing it first and foremost for the fans.
Yeah.
And then secondly for everything else. And if you put out good content and a good product, people will pay for it. They may still complain. You're never going to get away from that.
Well, yeah.
You can't please everybody. But if you do these things and make these decisions, I think in good faith with the fans in mind, I think you generally don't go wrong.
Yeah, I agree. And it's funny because I guess the last thing that's on my list in general, and I think we're both excited for it, is a TV show made with the fans in mind. And that is Fallout, which is premiering in April 2024. And it's from the creators of Westworld. And they did such a good handling of that environment. I think we're all really optimistic that we could have a better video game show than Halo, for example, which a lot of people slagged off, but I didn't think it was that bad.
Right.
But I think that Fallout could be truly great. Like, just looking at some of the initial models, of your ghoul companion and things like that, killer, looking absolutely killer, looking very game accurate, but in a realistic way that makes sense for real stuff in a real world. So very excited for that. That's probably the most video gamey thing that I'm excited for, the most blockbustery thing that I'm excited for, and that's available, I think, if you have Amazon Prime.
Yeah, it is on Amazon Prime. I'm looking forward to it as well. I think that there's so much more room for story in that. I mean, there's so many different vaults. There's just a depth in that world that I don't think ever really existed in Halo to begin with. Like, the main character doesn't ever speak for the most part on purpose, and he's like 9 foot tall space marine.
What? That's not normal? I'm a 9 foot tall space marine. I always have been.
with no voice. Like, he's just a bad. He's just a badass.
Voice. It's just very gruff, and he doesn't talk often.
Right. He's like the Witcher. But I would much rather. I mean, in the game, it's like I couldn't tell you what the story was in the first 3 Halos. I could not tell you. I know there's the broods involved. There's a
I'm
arbiter.
not going to show you up just now, but I do remember it.
Well, and that's fine. It's like, I just give me the gun, shoot things, and I get to the end of the level. That's it. Shoot, bang. That's it. And but in Fallout, you can't help but kind of get involved in the story. So outside of it being really bright, which I think that was the only big concern I've heard from other fans that have watched the trailers. Right.
I mean, but then House of the Dragon, they were mad because it was dark. You can't make people happy.
No, exactly. And so I thought that it's I'm not being nitpicky. Everything I've seen has been really interesting. I'm excited for that show as well. So yeah, good things next year. So with that wraps up this episode of Retro Rebel. I want to thank Amanda for this week's discussion. All the notes from this week's episode will be posted on our site, templeofgeek.com. If you'd like to add to the discussion or reach out with questions, sound off in the comments or message us on Facebook or Instagram at Retro Rebel Podcast. And please head over to wherever you get your podcasts and rate us, because that really helps our show. Until the next time.
We'll see you later.